So Bill 23 is a new piece of legislation in Ontario. It's meant to increase the speed and pace at which houses are built in Ontario. And I've looked at it as an ecologist, and I find there are a number of things quite interesting about the act. It's being described by some folks in the industry and in environmental groups as scary and something that we should be alerted about. I see it as an opportunity. The province is going to be changing some of the pieces of technical guidance that are associated with environmental approvals in Ontario that I think have been long overdue for replacement and modernization. All wetlands are important. All wetlands perform important functions. We need wetlands on the landscape, but not every wetland is the same and not every wetland is significant. So we could change how we describe significant. We could make the manual more accurately reflect the functional importance. And if we remove them, we'll replace them, but we won't just replace them with the same kind of degraded feature. We'll plan to do something better, and we can do better. We're creative people. We've got the science. We've built wetlands. There are groups like Ducks Unlimited that have been building wetlands for years. So we know how to do this. So it's time to do it better. And it's time to do it faster, because we are losing ground because of the biodiversity crisis, the loss of biodiversity, climate change. Things are moving at a pace where we can't afford the same old traditional slow approach to approvals and getting things done on the ground. We've got to speed this up. If we're going to look at natural heritage on our landscape, we can do it differently. The province is looking for comments about how would we do that differently. We've been designing natural heritage systems and putting them into official plans, building them on the ground for decades. Again, we run into a challenge when we come across features that are very small, have been on the landscape for a short period of time, but they're in the way of building a complete community, a healthy community with parks and natural areas where people can interact with nature. So we have a system now where all natural heritage features become significant, essentially, because even the tiniest pieces of nature on the landscape get labeled significant under the existing rules. But in our planning regime in Ontario, when you use the word significant, it means you can't touch it, essentially. So in situations where we need to remove minor natural areas, young woodlands, for example, or some wildlife habitat that's a thicket, a shrub thicket on a landscape, how do we do that in a way that produces positive outcomes? The province is using some language that I think is quite interesting. Instead of no negative impact, we're moving into a net positive outcome for woodlands and wildlife habitat. I think that's brilliant. I think we have the skills, we have the knowledge, we've shown it can be done on the land. If you can't avoid an impact, you're going to have to remove a feature. How do you offset that removal? And offsetting it implies understanding that feature really clearly, understanding the natural conditions, understanding if there's cultural importance attached to it, or historical or heritage importance. You really need to understand the feature and how it functions on the landscape before you can decide how you're going to replace it. And then it's not so much about replacing it, because we can do better than replacing a lot of the features that we're going to take off the landscape. We can be helping to create larger features, so you can fill in some small woodland openings and have a magnified impact on the size of interior habitat that some species are really going to need and appreciate. So we have an opportunity to do it strategically and differently and selectively and creatively, so that we can magnify the positive impacts. We don't just have to take a little feature and replace it. We have to be more creative, and we have to allow ourselves to be innovative and adapt. We need to listen to each other respectfully. We need to understand the science. We need to make better decisions, because ultimately the decisions we're making, once we harness these resources a little bit differently, there'll be better outcomes. We'll create better nature outcomes, and the outcomes for nature generally will be significantly increased and accelerated, which is what we need right now.